Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 1 Million Women Take Control virtual meeting for October. My name is Kim Schooler, and I have the privilege of hosting tonight's event. So, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There is a really close connection between domestic violence and money, which is why we're addressing this really important part of financial literacy for women. Our hope is that this meeting will help raise awareness and help women who may find themselves in an abusive relationship. Knowing how money works is the first step for many of us to taking control of our money and our lives. Now, since the subject we're going to cover tonight is very sensitive, viewer discretion is advised. If you feel triggered by tonight's meeting and want to talk to someone, you call a friend, call a family member, call me. My number is 770-335-3883, or feel free to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. And we're going to post that National Domestic Hotline number on the chat so everyone can see that. We really, would love to see your comments and questions. We've got a panel of amazing women leaders in WealthWave who are, prepared to help answer your questions or respond to your comments. And I am going to share my screen and just talk a little bit about Domestic Violence Awareness Month and why this is such an important subject for women in particular. So there we go. Let me fix the view. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. And on my screen, you'll see a slide that says Spotlight on Domestic Violence and Financial Abuse. Now, many of you know that I'm the co-author of the book, How Money Works for Women, Take Control or Lose It. And in this book, we tell the story about money through the lives of 9 different characters. Tonight's character is Sarah. You can see Sarah at the very top. Sarah is a real estate agent. She is actually based on a real life customer of mine. She came to me a little more than 12 years ago, and she had left an abusive relationship with nothing but custody of her 2 children. She ended up having to move back in with her parents to save money, and she took the real estate test and passed it and has been working as a real estate agent. That Sarah's story, I wish was a rare story, but it's not, unfortunately. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in her life, and 99% of those women are also victims of financial abuse because taking control of the money, of the finances, is one of the easiest way an abuser can take control over a victim. Now, 1 in 4 women, it's so many women that we had to address it in the book. And if it's not you, attending this session, and I hope it's not you, it's going to be your best friend or your sister or your cousin or your niece or your coworker. There's some woman in your life who's going through this who you care about. And so this is an important subject for all of us. Many victims report that they stay or go back to abusive relationships primarily due to financial obstacles. Or, if they have children, they are completely financially dependent on their abuser and they don't know how they're going to take care of their children, let alone themselves, if they don't have access to money. And it's one of the ways that abusers victimize women financially. They take financial control. Now, some examples of financial control, questions you can ask yourself. Does your partner deny or limit your access to money? Maybe your partner puts you on a strict allowance. Maybe they deny you access to information about money, to the bank statements or the pay stubs. Maybe your partner hides money from you or demands a detailed accounting of how you spend money and may even criticize your financial decisions. Your partner may threaten to withhold money from you and oftentimes will make financial decisions without consulting you or considering you at all. Now, in addition to financial control, another way that abusers hurt their victims financially is through employment or education sabotage. So you might ask yourself, does your partner pressure you to miss work, be late for work, or maybe insist that you quit work or your academic pursuits? Maybe they harass you at work or school, or they harass your coworkers, your bosses, or your school friends, trying to get you isolated, trying to get you fired from your job because it's just too much of a hassle to deal with you because of your abuser. Maybe they belittle your work or school accomplishments, criticize your career or academic choices, and worse, possibly physically harm you to prevent you from going to work or to school. In addition, your abuser might use economic exploitation to hurt you physically. Ask yourself, does your partner withdraw money from your bank accounts without your knowledge? Maybe they've added their name to your credit cards without your knowledge. Maybe they pay the mortgage, the rent, or other bills late, or they fail to pay those bills at all. They may run up a lot of debt in your name, take out a first or second mortgage on your home without you understanding it, and ultimately ruining your credit score. So they ruin your access to money, they block access to money, block access to information about money, and then prevent you from getting any resources because they've helped to hurt your credit score. When you think about leaving an abusive situation, almost every aspect involves money, from putting gas in the car or buying a plane ticket or a bus ticket to, getting a new place to live, to putting food on the table. All of those things cost money, which is why it's easy to understand why so many women say, because I'm financially dependent, because I can't work, or I've got no access to resources because of my credit score, or I've got bankruptcies or judgment liens or tax liens on my credit history, I'm not able to do any of these things that are required to leave a situation. So there are a lot of things that you can do to prepare yourself to leave and things that you would continue to do after you leave. And the first one that we recommend everyone does, whether you're alone, in a healthy relationship, in an unhealthy relationship, learn how money works. It is an important skill for every single one of us, especially women, to understand. Second, be involved with your finances. Again, whether you're alone, in a healthy relationship, in an unhealthy relationship, be involved, be engaged, ask questions, look at the accounts online, ask questions of your financial professional if you're working with one. Do research online or read books about it. Read the How Money Works book, but be involved with your finances. And then look for the red flags. I went through a lot of the red flags that cover, financial control, employment sabotage, academic sabotage, or economic exploitation. Those are the three categories of red flags that we look for in an abusive relationship. Be on the lookout for you, but be on the lookout for your friends, your sisters, your nieces, your aunts, your mothers, your best friends, your coworkers. Be on the lookout for those red flags because oftentimes when I talk to someone who's gone through this, they tell me that when they're in the middle of it, they can't see it. They don't see themselves as a victim. They don't see themselves as someone who's being abused. They're just so busy, trying to survive, that they can't see it. And so these women need our help, not only to help them see it, but to help them to be a resource for them to leave that situation when they're ready to. And then we really encourage women to talk about the problem. So many women feel shame or embarrassment about being in an abusive relationship, but it's 1 in 4 women. It doesn't start off looking like abuse. It usually starts off looking like love. You may think it's love. Your partner may say, honey, let me take care of the bills. Let me, do this or that for you. You just take care of the house. You raise the children. I want to do this for you. And you may think, wow, that's a sign of love, that that person really loves me, that they want to take care of me. But bit by bit, if they start taking over more control of the money and denying you access and information, those are the red flags. And it's by talking about the problem that we bring this to light. Sometimes talking about what's going on in your life with your friends will help you realize what you're going through, because when you say it out loud, it becomes real, and it's something that you've got to kind of face and confront. The other thing is, women who've gone through this, and we're going to hear from an amazing woman tonight who's gone through this. She's dedicated herself. So many of these women dedicate themselves to talking about it and helping other women, because it's not shameful. It's nothing you should be embarrassed about. It's nothing that should be kept in the dark. This is a problem that all women must face. All women must help each other with. And so talking about the problem is a really important step. And then for those women who find themselves in an abusive situation, put a personal financial safety plan in place. If you've got the time to plan ahead for your escape, and we're going to hear from a police officer about kind of what's involved with that. But if you're in a dangerous situation, leave. But if you can plan ahead and set money aside ahead and take some steps ahead, then do that. Stash cash away someplace that your abuser is not going to find. Open a bank account and a credit card in your name that your abuser will not find. And it's really important. Your abuser knows everything about you. They know your middle name, they know your maiden name, they know your mother's maiden name, they know your first pet's name. They know all of those keys to getting access to your passwords. So use very unique passwords and usernames to lock up that bank account and that credit card information. Have the statements go to a P.O. box or a friend's address, or use an email address that your partner is not going to be able to find. And then your phone can be your best friend. Take pictures of everything. If you can't access your passport, the health insurance cards, your marriage license, your birth certificate, or those of your children, take pictures. Take pictures of the bank account statements. Take pictures of the investment account statements. Take pictures of all of those important documents, because you may have to leave with only your phone. And so make it worth it. Now hide those pictures on your phone, but make sure you take those pictures. And then when you leave, make sure that you, as I said, change your passwords, change your account numbers, change your user ID numbers, put a freeze on your credit reports, on your credit cards, all of that. So your partner isn't able to run up more debt in your name. I really love this quote from Beyonce. She's one of my favorites. She said, if everything was perfect, you would never learn and you would never grow. None of us is perfect. I'm one of the most imperfect people out there. And so don't worry that your life may not be what you imagined, or that it may not be what you would like other people to think it is. We are all imperfect, and it's in that imperfection and that being authentic and real with each other that I think is real beauty and real growth. And from there, that's where we can really learn and help each other. Now, I also kind of wanted to share this slide. If you wanted to find resources in your area, you can go to www.domesticshelters.org, and I think you type in your zip code and they help you find what resources are nearby for you. And then again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is on the screen. Take that number down for you or a friend, someone that you care about, so that we don't want anyone to feel like they're going through this alone. There's a lot of help out there. In addition to family and friends, and there is a lot of help out there from third-party resources. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I wanted to introduce a very dear friend of mine. She's been my friend for more than 15 years. And I would say I've got a lot of really amazing, powerful women friends. You know who you are. Many of them have joined this webinar tonight. But I'd have to say that Debbie Coble is my badass friend. All my friends are badass, but Debbie is the baddest of all. So Debbie Coble is a captain with the Johns Creek Police Department here in Georgia. And that's how we met when I used to live in Johns Creek, and we've been close friends ever since. But through the years, Debbie and I have talked a lot about domestic violence and financial abuse and the things that she's done and seen in her career as a police officer. So, Debbie, why don't you share with everyone kind of what you've seen in the communities you've served?
Well, welcome everybody. And Kimmy, thank you for having me. I can't believe it's been 15 years.
I we
I'm
look
feeling
the
old.
same.
Over the years, unfortunately, you do see the same things over and over again, and financial abuse is one of the main ones. In fact, if when you look at domestic violence, it's basically about control. And if they control the money, they can control your choices. And if they control your choices, they basically control you. So it's all about control and keeping this person in this nice little bubble. I like how you said that, it starts slowly and they kind of build on it. You're looking at things where we all know that, like, there's a cycle when it comes to domestic violence where it builds up, the person has the explosion, and then they come back, and then there's this honeymoon phase where they're, giving you flowers. I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. And then the cycle kind of goes back around to where it builds up and then they explode again. We see, I would estimate about 6 or 7 times that we would be called out to a location and talk to somebody before they're willing to leave. And a lot of that absolutely has to do with the financial control, because that's probably one of the number one reasons why women won't leave, is they have that financial control over them. When you're looking at domestic violence, it can be anything. It can be abusive language. It can be they are targeting them and following them on every single thing they do. Obviously, it can be physical abuse and those kinds of things that go with it. But it's sad to watch as an officer, because you know that, one, that person has to be in a place where they feel like they can do it. and you gave them some tips on, how to get ready, how to prepare yourself when you're looking at, doing what you can, have a to go bag packed, getting your paperwork in order, asking a friend if you can have things sent to their home, because it can be really volatile. And I will tell you that when you're in a violent domestic violence type of situation, when that person leaves is the most dangerous time. So that can be very, very scary. And there are hotlines out there, like you said, the 1-800 number for domestic violence, which I'll say it again, it was 1-800-799-7233. There's places to go. And one of the main things that I, I think an abuser does when they first start to abuse, they segregate that person from the people that they love and care about. So you're looking at, all of a sudden they're not seeing their family as much. They're not seeing their friends as much. And because these are the people that are going to look at it and say something's wrong. And they know that. So they're totally pulling them away from their support system so they have control.
Well, and Debbie, one of the things that you and I have talked about is you can't stereotype who's going to be a victim or who's going to be an abuser. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it all over the years.
It does not matter. It doesn't matter, what race you are, what social economic background, what your job is, what your social status is. It hits every single place that you could be. It doesn't matter. And I work now in a very affluent area, and we see domestic violence cases every day. So it really does not matter. You don't have to be poverty level to deal with domestic violence. It's there, unfortunately, and we do what we can to help people. And it's like one of the things I would recommend to help somebody is to be there for them and listen and stay connected to them, because it's going to be that thing where that moment where they feel that they can leave. The best thing you can do is stay connected and support them and help them through it without being too pushy, because there's a lot involved, if that makes sense. You can always ask them, do you feel safe going home, and those kind of things, but you can support them and guide them and give them resources and help them in that way. And eventually they'll make that choice.
Well, and you said that when they do make the decision to leave, that can be the most dangerous time. What are some of the things that women need to keep in mind and when they have made the decision to leave?
They have to, well, if it's a very violent situation, they got to be very strategic. Like you said, putting money away, keeping, adding up as much as you can, however you want to do it, getting your papers and your financial papers in order, and, whether or not it's getting a bank account and those kind of things, putting your stuff. Now, you said something earlier that made me think about when you got to hide something. I have an idea for hiding. Put it in the bottom of a tampon box or pad box, because men never ever want to touch those things. I promise you, they ain't going in there. So that's a good place to think about hiding something. Um, it's it's sad, because these men, it's all about the control. It's totally about the control. And I, as an officer going out to a house, and I've been there, over and over again, and sometimes we got to remind ourselves not to get frustrated, because you're not in that situation, and you have to just kind of guide them until that moment that they're ready. And the moment that they're ready, oh my God, I would hop on it. I'd be like, Wait till he goes to work. When he goes to work, you pull up a U-Haul and you clean out that house and you take every single thing you possibly can with you. Let the court tell you when to bring it back. I did not say that, but I said that. But,
Would you
because
recommend a restraining order?
I would, however, it's very important to know that the restraining order is a piece of paper. And again, not only when you're going to leave, that restraining order is also can be a trigger. So restraining orders are great. They give us the legal ability to help enforce it, where if you've got a restraining order against your boyfriend, against your husband, and they break it, it becomes and becomes an aggravated stalking. So like a stalking case is where, somebody's following you and contacting you over and over again. When you can lift it up to an aggravated stalking case, you actually have some teeth there. So a restraining order is, but you have to be very careful when that restraining order is served and stuff like that. So, I understand it can be very dangerous. And I used to work crimes against women and children when I worked for Fulton County and stalking cases and stuff like that. And, I would look at some of these cases that were coming in and read the report, and I'm like, ooh, this is a serious one. Or you could just read it and somebody's like about to go through a divorce and, they're playing around, messing with some stuff. But you could really tell when some of the stuff was serious. And oh my God, as an officer, one of the best things I've ever been able to do is help somebody get out of that situation and walk them through it. Like this is what you need to do and keep notes and all this just documentation and stuff like that. But we don't always get to see the end results of what we deal with on the street as a regular patrol officer. When you're a detective, you actually follow it through more to the end. So you kind of get to see a lot of the results of dealing and helping with the people.
You mentioned earlier that sometimes you have to go to a house more than one time. And it's got to be somewhat frustrating for law enforcement to do that. Is is law enforcement, that third time they're called to the house, are they still, knowing that the woman hasn't filed charges in the past, are they still going to um, be as attentive? And you know what I mean is because
Yeah,
it's got to be
absolutely.
frustrating for you.
Well, and in the past, it really was like that. And even when I was a young officer, you have to step back and say, okay, what's going on here? Why are they not leaving? Because it can be frustrating because you see it and you want to help them. Um, However, the domestic violence laws are very clear now. Okay, so if you call the police officer out there, you as the potential victim does not even have to cooperate with us anymore. So let's say I go out to a call and the man hit the woman and there's a bruise or something on her, right? And he's like, I didn't touch her, whatever, but we have marks. We have a physical thing that we could see, or there was an independent witness. It doesn't matter what she says anymore. We are obligated by law to take care of it and take the primary aggressor out of the home and arrest them. So that took a lot of pressure off of the victims for having to testify because they're not the testifying one now. We are. So that absolutely helped that law. And from what I've seen in the attitude of officers over the years has changed quite a bit because I think we understand more. I really think everything comes down to just understanding more and how everything works. And when you understand what's going on, it helps you.
Right, right.
And we all get into this job because we care and we want to help people.
Truly, truly. So, you know, some women are probably listening to this and they've heard me go through the red flags and they're thinking, well, my husband does that or he does that, but I don't know. Am I in a healthy relationship? Am I in an unhealthy relationship? what kind of advice do you have or resources are you aware of that they can go to try and sort through that?
Okay, so I have a couple things. One, and I know people team they hesitate when I say it, but what does your family think and what do your friends think? Because they're always going to be the ones that are looking out for you. And if your family and friends don't like that person, there might be something for you to look at. Too, there's another thing that you can do, and there's a man named Gavin DeBecker, and he's one of my favorites. So when I teach my safety classes, I use a lot of his information from the book of It's the Gift of Fear, and he has come up with a mosaic. And this mosaic, it can be for domestic violence with women, with men, violence in the workplace, whether or not you think somebody's going to, go postal, or it can be elected officials. But this mosaic will ask you, and I took it one time just to see what it was, and there was a lot of questions in there, but it kind of gives you a guideline on whether or not you're in a situation that could be potentially very volatile or violent, right? I actually wrote down this email address, or not email address, the website is mosaicmethod.com. So that's mosaicmethod.com. And I would highly recommend looking at it if you have any questions. If you have questions about friends or family, you can look at it. If you have questions about yourself and whether or not you think this could be going somewhere, it doesn't hurt to check it out. And like you said, if you are this person in that's having it coming to you right now, make sure that you're clearing your screens and all your websites and stuff like that, because you don't want this person who would be tracking you and following everything that you do, because that's something that they do because it's all about the control.
Right. Well, Debbie, it's been great having you on our Zoom tonight. Thank you after a long day's work
You're
to
so
come and
welcome.
spend this time with us. I mean, she's amazing and it's just such a dear friend of mine. But thank you for all of your guidance and wisdom tonight. We
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. And if anybody needs help, you can let me know. Okay.
Thanks, Debbie. So, I want to introduce our next special guest speaker, Andrea D. Jenkins. Now, Andrea is a survivor and a thriver of domestic violence. And because of her experiences, she is on a mission to eradicate financial illiteracy and to help women in abusive situations. I mean, you heard the presentation earlier. You heard Captain Coble talk about the fact that it's all about control for an abuser. And one of the easiest ways to control someone is to control the money. And so, because of that, Andrea's life's work has been about financial literacy for women. Now, in addition to leading her own financial business based in Macon, Georgia, she also does a lot of work in the Atlanta area. Andrea is the author of the book A Joint Effort: Life After Hip Implant Recall. And on top of all of that, Andrea is proficient in American Sign Language and is frequently asked to interpret financial information for deaf clients. So, Andrea, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Also, a very, very dear friend of mine, and my companion when I do some long range driving. She's a great person to have in the car with you, as long as she's not in charge of the snacks.
Thank you so much for having me this evening, Kim. What a pleasure it is to be here.
So, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind sharing with everyone kind of your experience going, being in an abusive relationship.
Absolutely. And, I have to say everything that, Captain Coble was saying, everything that you were saying, I have experienced all of that. And it makes sense. So, yes, I am a survivor and a thriver, and very proud to say so. But I wasn't always in this position, in this place. You could not tell me at the time that I was married that I was a victim of domestic violence. That was just impossible, not me. I was always vibrant, always an outgoing person. So I looked at it as, well, I'm a fighter. I'm fighting him back. He's hitting me. I'm hitting him back. I'm not in an abusive marriage. But it got worse. And it did not start off that way. However, there were signs that I dismissed and just did not pay attention to. But over time, it really got devastating, um, to the point where now I was the one who made the money in the household, but I was still financially abused because of that control. He wanted to control everything to the point where when I ended up in the hospital, there was, I can't remember what you call it, but anyway, he was not allowed to come into the hospital. He was not allowed to come into the hospital room. Somehow he got past everybody and made it to my hospital room. And I remember him whispering in my ear, leaning over the bed, the few minutes that he had the time to be in the room. And he said to me, "You have to pay for where you live." So that was just one of the negative things that, among many, prior to that, he attempted my life at least three different times. And as Captain, Coble mentioned, that wasn't just one time that I left and I went back. And then something else happened, I left, and then I went back and left and I went back. So it was a cycle. It was a cycle. But there was a child that was involved, that made
Right.
it really challenging.
Well, one of the biggest questions that people ask is, why don't you just leave? Why do you stay? If you're being abused, why do you stay? And why did you stay? And what would you say to people who ask that question?
That's a very good question. For me, I've always been someone who wanted to have children. I did not have the privilege of being able to carry a child or, have or give birth of my own. But the person I was married to, he had a child, and I just loved on that baby as he was my own. And so he was my child and went everywhere with me, and my family did everything. I took care of him. My family supported and took care of him. So it made it very difficult for me to leave. And I'm getting a little bit emotional now, but it became extremely difficult for me to leave because I felt I was leaving my baby. Even though I didn't give birth to him, he was still mine. And so I stayed. I wanted to take the blows. Let me take the
Andrea?
hits.
Oh, there we go. You
Okay.
just froze up a little bit.
Okay. I took the punches. I took the hits because I didn't want, the child to take the hits. So I stayed for that reason. It wasn't that I just was so in love with this guy. I was never in love with him, but I did love him. But I loved that baby. And I wanted to be the mother that he needed because his biological mother, she had a total of 12 children and lost custody of all of those children. And the that one child was able to stay, with us, but he was not my child. But when I finally got up enough nerve to leave, I could not take him with me. So for years, I carried that heartache with me because I couldn't take him with me. And it was just devastating. It was extremely devastating.
Well, and you and he have since reconnected, I know, and have a wonderful relationship.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. We did reconnect. When he turned 18, he's in his 30s now. When he turned 18, he reached out to me and reassured me of his love for me. And that just meant so much to me. At that time, I began talking a little bit more about domestic violence and reaching the hearts of others so that they knew that someone was speaking on their behalf. Um, but for so long, I worried about him. And, he made it very clear how much he loved me, but that he was not able to connect with me because his dad would not allow him to. As often as he wanted to call, he was not able to do so. Um, Unfortunately, over the past 6 months or so, he has been in and out of jail. And most recently, they have just arrested him again for rape. So it is very unfortunate that the experience that he had with his dad, it did affect him. Although he constantly talked about how I had his blessing to talk about the violence. And he talked about the importance of women not staying with your abuser for the sake of the children. Um,
Right.
and so this news just came to me yesterday. So that's heartbreaking because I hurt for him because of what he experienced and what he saw in the house, what his father did to me.
Right.
But then I hurt for the women that he has abused. So I'm kind of torn there. So that's why I have such a
Right.
passion to make sure that I am there for any woman who is experiencing trauma.
Well, and the important work that we do with financial literacy to lift everyone up.
Absolutely.
But, before we talk about the great work you're doing now, there was a story you shared with me that has stayed with me, Andrea, about when you made the final decision to leave. You didn't have any money and you lived in your car for a couple of days because you were too embarrassed to ask your father. And knowing that your father would have done anything for you, but you still, because of that shame and embarrassment, didn't want to ask for money, and so you lived in your car. If you could just share that, that felt like, what that experience is, so we have a much better understanding of what women are going through.
Absolutely. You know, I'm a prideful person and I look at myself as a very strong, independent woman. I always have looked at myself that way. And so, of course, being in an abusive situation was extremely embarrassing. How in the world could I let other people know what I'm actually experiencing? That's just, I got to keep that to myself. But the abuse was so bad, and I was diagnosed with a chronic condition. And I'll never forget, my doctor told me, your recovery depends on your state of mind and your state of well-being. I attempted to leave several times. But as was mentioned earlier, when you attempt to leave, it gets even more violent. And I remember planning to leave one day. He was there, and I started packing up. And I said, you don't want me here. I don't even know why I'm still here. Let me just leave. And he threatened me. He said, if you touch one piece of clothing, then it's going to be harder for you. And I just dismissed that and I went to grab my clothes and my shoes. It was time for me, let me just get what I can and get out of here. And at that moment is when he began to punch me in the face, in the stomach, and he would spit in my face and punch me in the head. So I knew I could not leave that night. I had to leave everything alone. But another night, what I did, I could not take it anymore. I felt as though I was on the verge of having a nervous breakdown. So I packed as much clothing as I could in my truck. I had a white Nissan Pathfinder at the time, and I loaded that truck up. And I went to a girlfriend of mine's house, and she was afraid. So I could not stay there because I didn't want to put her in a bad situation. I was too embarrassed, too afraid to say something to my parents because they would have swooped in, of course, and taken care of me. but I wanted to make sure I was strong. I don't need them to see that was a sign of weakness to me. I was being weak, right? That's how I viewed it at that time. And so I went to a hotel and I wanted to get a room and I had my a card, but I didn't know the PIN number. I was already trembling. I could not remember the PIN code. They wouldn't take cash. And so I was just out of luck and I refused to go to my parents' house because I didn't want to let them down. And so I slept in my truck for a couple of days. And then I eventually went back. Um, I finally left him. You would have thought maybe when he attempted my life the first couple of times there that I would just go ahead and leave, but that's not when I left. But I started thinking about something my dad said to me, and I held on to it. My dad told me, he said, I've been hearing some things, and what's going to happen is I'm going to wind up killing that man. He said, and then I will be the one in jail, and you will be safe and get to enjoy the rest of the family. But I won't get to be with my family because I had to kill a man that was causing harm to my daughter. So that stayed with me. And over time, I eventually left. And it was one of the best decisions that I made. I've had police officers come, to my house several times. And I'll never forget, I had one officer tell me, ma'am, I don't know why you call us. I mean, we've come here before. Um, and he would take off and leave, but they would stay, allow me to get my things, and then I would leave. But I finally left when, I had to go into the hospital and it was time for me to go. But it took some time between that and wanting to be there for a child.
Right.
That was very important to me. Let me stand up for this child that is not able to stand up for himself. Let me do it. Let me take the blows. And that's what I chose to do.
Right. Well, you are one of the strongest, most inspiring people I have ever met, Andrea. You inspire me every single day. And the work that you do now as the survivor slash thriver is amazing. So why don't you share with us kind of what you've been doing, and how important financial literacy is to you?
Oh, yes, wonderful. Now I can wipe my tears a little bit here now. I love this journey that I am on, having the responsibility and the obligation to teach financial education. Financial literacy is so imperative. And I am in an amazing position to reach out and be that person for other women. Um, we've got an event coming up at the Mercer University here. I've had an opportunity to speak, be a keynote speaker several times, there and in other locations. And with that, it's not so much about, I've got to teach you this and you better get it. It is, let me show you, let me be transparent, first of all, so you understand I have not always been in this place. So there is an opportunity for you to change. And I have spoken with so many women in so many different states, several interviews that I have been on, panel discussions, keynote speaker, and everywhere I go, every keynote speech that I give, every woman that I speak to reiterates or reassures me that I am doing what I need to do because I hear the word, thank you, Andrea, so many times. Because it's not just about the financial industry, it's about gaining control of your finances. And when you gain control and that insight and understanding of your finances, then you regain control of who you are. And that makes a big difference. So I'm able to hear other women say, "You just shared my story," or "Thank you for using your voice," or "Thank you for teaching me this concept. I never heard it before." So it has been a treat for me to be in this position to serve other women because I listen to them. I don't always have to do the talking. Sometimes they just need to be heard. So by me taking the time to listen, then I build their trust in their relationship and they realize, oh, this is a safe place for me to be. That's important to me. Letting others recognize, communicating with me, you're in a safe place, and this is a no judgment zone, and we will get through this process together.
Well, I think that is why it's so important for us to really talk to women, not only about how money works, but to encourage more women to consider being a financial educator or to
Yes,
consider being a financial professional, because we do help create those safe places
right.
to talk about what you're going through, to talk about what you're worried about, to talk about what you want for the future, to
Yeah,
talk about, your greatest fears and your greatest joys and your greatest hopes. Women have the ability to create that safe place for other women to do that. And so I think, in an industry where women are such a small percentage, in our company in WealthWave, women represent 40 to 45% of the financial educators and financial professionals out there. And it is so amazing, Andrea, to work side by side with you and see the work that you do. I mean, you're everywhere in community groups, in colleges, you're in the libraries, you're speaking to, students and everyday people, and you're just reaching out to everyone.
absolutely, absolutely. Because that during domestic violence, there's a lot of emotional turmoil. There mental, emotional, physical turmoil. And so being in all these different places and just having the conversation, being on everyone else's level and letting them see, listen, we can do this together. Let's gain some stability here. Let's start a foundation and I can help you do that. Let me show you how to do that. And let me hold your hand. If that's what it's going to take, if we need to hold hands and have the conversation, it's like putting a piece of putting a puzzle together. Now, I'm not a fan of puzzles, but let me tell you, when you think about a puzzle, right? A 500, 3,000 piece puzzle, and you look at that, it can be tedious and it can be overwhelming. And it's easy to put the pieces back in the box and just walk away. But what I tell people is no, what we're going to do together is take one piece of that puzzle at a time. And we don't start in the middle because then you're pulling your hair out, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you got too much going on. I don't know what piece goes where. We start on the border. So you put one piece together at a time, but you're not doing it alone. So several people putting one piece together at a time, then you produce an immaculate puzzle. And I let individuals know you may have me right here in front of you, but I am not the only one that you have. I am part of a full financial firm, and WealthWave has allowed me to be that and to bring other agents in to support and to help these individuals. And when I let them see that, let them know that, hey, listen, you're not alone, because I'm not alone, you know?
Right.
So you have the support. So when they ask me if I get a call, I accept the opportunity. Most of the time, I accept the opportunity because I never know who it is I am going to be able to help at that very moment.
That's exactly right, Andrea. Well, as always, it's been an incredible pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much. You too, like Captain Coble, after a long day of work, stayed up late. We're on the East Coast, so it's almost 10 p.m. Eastern time, but you stayed up and spent a lot of time with us just to share your story, and we really appreciate that.
I thank you so much. I appreciate you more than you realize. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you, Andrea. So, at the beginning of this webinar, I talked about Sarah, the character that we're focused on, and the fact that Sarah is a real live customer of mine. Her name isn't Sarah, but she did come to me a little more than 12 years ago, as I said, with nothing more than, her two children, and moved back in with her parents and started over, took her real estate test. And now, 12 years later, she is one of the top real estate agents in Atlanta. She has built an incredible business. She owns her own home. She put both of her kids through college. She recently married a man she met in her church who treats her the way she deserves to be treated. And because of their blended family, she's now a grandmother. 12 years ago, none of that seemed possible. But you know what? Like Andrea said, piece by piece, step by step, you put your life back together, whether you're starting over or starting behind or starting in the middle, it doesn't matter. Piece by piece, step by step, you can put this back together so that you can create the life that you want to create. Now, this is, the last of our 1 million Women Take Control virtual events for 2025. We started this series back in February. We took one or two characters a month and focused on them. And we decided to end in October because of the holidays coming up, but because, Domestic Violence Awareness Month is kind of the exclamation point on why financial literacy is so important for women. And so we do plan to start this series up again next year, beginning in February or March. So be on the lookout for information about that. But in the meantime, learn how money works, get with the person who invited you to this event and talk about your finances. Talk about what your hopes and dreams are. Talk about what your fears are. Talk about what it is you want to accomplish. And seriously consider owning your own business in financial services. Thank you all very much. And I hope you have wonderful holidays coming up. And I will see you again in 2026. Good night, everyone.